can you talk a little bit about some of the changes that Google has recently announced and what that entails?
Yeah, so a first disclaimer is I'm not super intimately familiar with some of the stack changes that Google is making. A lot of it ultimately boils down to the following, right? Google, in a true privacy sense, is about 5 years behind Apple, as far as I can tell. Any changes that Google is doing today around limit ad tracking and so forth are changes that Apple made years and years ago, right? One very simple example of that is the old Google limit ad tracking capability. It really worked very differently from Apple's capability. Limit ad tracking on Apple literally meant you can no longer track the users and your IDs have zeroed out. But that was not the case on Google even until this year, right? And it was a slightly different way of implementing the intent of or stated intent of ensuring user privacy. And so when we look at the ecosystem, the way we look at some of the changes Google is making is they are going to have to catch up to Apple over the next 24 months, and they're going to make preparations to do so, little by little. Ultimately, the consumer sentiment is moving much more towards privacy. And I think that is going to force the hand on Google's end as well. More specific to some of the changes Google is making, I'm not an expert at Flock. And so I'll actually let Sergio maybe comment on some of those things. But ultimately, it is any recent news about Google's changes to limit ad tracking. I still feel they're very basic changes that Apple implemented years and years ago. But it's a move in the right direction to some extent, or at a minimum, it is a move in the expected direction for the rest of the industry. And so it behooves the ad tech ecosystem to build for both Android and iOS as we build for privacy compliance systems. I think the future, even 3 years later, for example, is going to look very different. And so all the old systems that really relied heavily on a single user identifier like a GPID on Google or IDFA on iOS, that system is not going to be super relevant a few years from now. But that is not to say contextual and different types of targeting are no longer going to be applicable. I still think all the good parts of the ad tech system are still going to be applicable down the line.